Mm. Well, the coffee's good this morning, Will.
Little something to perk you up there, brother.
Oh, what are you drinking? Bang or what is
I'm
that?
drinking Bang Black Cherry Vanilla.
Wow, look at that.
Yeah, that'll get you to your target heart rate, let me tell you.
I bet. I've got AFib. That's why I probably shouldn't be drinking those.
Yeah, stay away from this stuff. Probably don't even pick it up or anything.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I bought a Red Bull the other day. My wife and daughter was with me.
Uh-huh.
We're leaving Lowe's, doing some remodeling stuff around the house, and they see me pull that out and they're like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, I'm drinking. I'm going to drink this Red Bull. Like, no, you're not. Put that back.
Well, what I just heard is it's okay to have some bourbon then.
That's what I heard, pal.
Yeah. We've been married a long time, dude. You can read between the lines.
Yeah, I'm adept at reading between the lines.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we got folks jumping on already.
All right.
Well, we got Will Rhodes is on from Missouri.
Yep.
Diane
Owens there. Merry Christmas to you as well, man.
Let's see. Will Parker is on. Jesse is on. Alan Kelly. Man, this is going to be a good show this morning. We are going to talk about the housing crisis. 2007 to 2008. And of course, you can't really explain the housing crisis without kind of going back in time a little bit and kind of talking about the causal factors that led up to that mess, right?
Yep.
Will?
Absolutely.
So if you're just joining us this morning, my name is Rich Brown, co-host, co-founder of the American Warrior Society, the American Warrior Show, America's leading self-defense podcast. And I'm joined by my dear friend, Mr. Will Wood. Good morning, Will.
Good morning, Rich. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing better than I deserve.
Well, aren't we all?
And so I'm a retired Marine Corps officer, former police officer, corrections officer, and Sheriff's Department Special Operations officer. And Will, tell them about yourself, please.
I'm a current airline pilot, captain for a major airline. Just love this news and economic stuff. Like to help some people out and give back a little bit that I can, and hopefully add some value to things here.
Will's being very modest. He doesn't want you to know that he is the president of his local Mensa club. So, we got a good show for you this morning. But before we can do that, we got to pay for the show. So let's talk about sponsors.
All right.
Will, you want to tell them about the Cool Fire Trainer?
Yeah, man. Cool Fire Trainer. That's the next step above dry fire. You take out your barrel, your recoil spring, you put that in there, charge it up with some CO2. And when you're doing your dry fire, you get some felt recoil. The slide actually moves. It's a great way for, an accomplished shooter to reinforce that getting that good solid grip on the gun. I know that's valuable for me. Otherwise, I get a little lazy if I just do dry fire. Also, as we talked about before, Rich, I've used it as a way to transition brand new shooters from dry fire into cool fire into live fire. And I found it works just marvelously for that. And with the price of ammo doing what it's doing, it's coming down a little, but it's still double what it was before.
Yeah, you might want to make a good Christmas gift. Would be a Cool Fire Trainer and maybe some ammo to take to the range.
Yeah, let's give out our addresses.
Please like and hit that share button, guys. You're going to want to check out today's show, especially if you're still scratching your head over what happened to our American housing market in 2007, 2008. And you're like, what? How the hell did we get into this great recession? But it led to a tremendous bull market, as we know. Let's also talk about APPHemp.com. That's my good friends over there at Appalachian Standard, makers of the finest CBD products that your money could possibly buy. They're going to help your joints feel better. They're going to help you sleep better. They're going to improve your cognitive function. They're going to do a lot of good things for you. If you don't want to take the little bit of tincture into the tongue before you go to sleep, it's okay. They got salves for you as well. Please check them out. They're doing amazing things, and they're phenomenal, phenomenal people. We got Mountain Man Medical, man. It's not too late to pick up some stocking stuffers from Mountain Man Medical. Maybe you just need a couple of Israeli bandages to send your son or daughter off to school with. Maybe you just need to pick up a little combat gauze or quick clot, or maybe you want to get them a good tourniquet that is approved by the TCCC community. They have everything for you over at Mountain Man Medical. Please check them out. If you want to get a co-branded trauma kit, that's phenomenal. If you don't, you just want to pick up a few products to throw in your bag, that's phenomenal as well. Precision Holsters, makers of the Ultra Appendix that I use. The Mike Seeklander Signature Series is also a really cool one. They got the Fast line of competition holsters. That's PH Fast for precision holsters. And last but not least, we got Century Martial Arts, makers of the Bob XL. The Bob XL is a body opponent bag, extra long, so you can work on your thigh kicks, etc. John Shriver is on. You ran into John recently, didn't you?
I did. I was down in Oklahoma, and he and I got a chance to hang out and go to the range and do a little shooting and break bread together. And John's a straight up shooter. He's working hard out there.
That's outstanding. So let's get into the show without any further ado. Mr. Will, please like and hit that share button. Like I said, why are two self-defense guys? If you're just watching this morning, you're probably familiar with Will and I. You've heard us talk about emerging threats. We've been slow walking you through the American economy over the last couple hundred years. And now we're up to the housing crisis of 2007, 2008. But Will, why the heck are we talking about this stuff?
Well, we can, carry a gun, carry a knife, in a way, carry a lawyer with our friend Andrew Bronco over there. And those are great tools to have when that's the problem, when that's the situation. But we all deal every day with the economy, with what stems from that, and those are threats to us as well. It's a threat to how we support our family, how we feed them, and that is, if we're not taking care of those things, everything else is pretty much a detail.
That's exactly right. These are the macro things that you can do micro things in your home, right? You can do things that are going to protect yourself. One of the things that I've been doing lately is taking a page from my dear friend Justin Carroll, former MARSOC operator, and that is doing a little micro prepping at home. I will leave my gear in my pants and leave my shoes and everything right by the bed. So if I have to roll out of the rack in the middle of the night, when I put my trousers on, I've got all my tools already with me. So I like that.
But I remember you did a show some time back with your battle belt, your I call it my go belt, but I keep one of those near the bed as well, over by the dresser. Pick that up. I've got everything I need. Like you say, just micro prep. But if something goes bump in the middle of the night, and it's not an extreme threat right there at the bedroom door, so to speak, you can have all your tools on you in just a flash.
Yeah, Ed Scarborough is in. Actually, Ed was, I was his instructor at the School of Infantry. So Semper Fi, brother. Good to see you on this morning. Dr. Gordon Botson is on. Good morning, folks. Thank you to everyone watching, to everyone that will listen in the replay or watch us on our YouTube channel, Coffee with Rich. So let's talk about the housing crisis. Like we alluded to a moment ago, man, this was years and years in the making. And it was an epic financial and economic collapse that really hurt ordinary folks. Didn't hurt the banks all that much, although a few banks went under. But ordinary folks, man, lost their jobs, their life savings, their homes, or all three. And you and I were talking before the show, and I wasn't sure if I was going to talk about this, but I'll go ahead and put it out there. My mom was affected. My mom lost her home because of this. So this is something that impacted my family and maybe impacted yours as well.
It impacted everybody, really. I own a business with my bride, and it impacted on the commercial side of real estate greatly. Not to go too deep into it for this, but commercial real estate, the loans are amortized over 30 years, like a home mortgage is, but the loan term can be as short as 5 years. So every 5 years, you have a balloon payment and have to pay off the balance. And of course, everybody just refis it and continues on. You must have 20% down to buy a piece of commercial real estate, period. If you don't have 20% of room, you're not getting a loan. So when those property values dropped, I know a number of developers that even though their renters were still paying the rent or they had businesses in properties, they couldn't get refied even though they could make the payments. So it affected that side greatly, which then in turn affected the small businesses that were in there.
Yeah, I remember when this was going on, I was running some operations in the Marine Corps, and we had, the flat screen set up in our office, and the colonel and the staff, we would all kind of just watching this disaster unfold every day. And every one of us is standing there talking about all the money we were losing in our retirement, our stocks and bonds, et cetera.
Yep.
It was a brutal time. And, of course, I was fortunate. Will, probably you and I both were fortunate enough that we didn't lose maybe a whole lot in the short term. I watched my net worth get about a third of it taken off, but I didn't sell anything. So I didn't realize the loss,
Yeah. Because I've got some friends and family in real estate, and I know a few commercial guys, everybody was saying, this is stupid, this is ridiculous. And I actually went almost all cash about 6 months before
Oh, wow.
before the crash.
Good move.
I'm pretty good at doing that part. I'm not so good at buying back in when I should. So I probably would have been just as well staying in and riding it out, but it was a little easier to sleep at night.
Yeah, man. If you would have jumped out and then snatched up a couple of really good things, that you would have.
Yeah. If only I would have bought Netflix at 4, like I thought about doing.
Bro, I feel the same way. Reed Hastings, the CEO of Netflix, made a couple of boneheaded errors and the stock bottomed out. And
Yep.
I told my wife, I said, we should throw about $5,000 at this because it's going to explode. And of course I didn't, because I'm a dummy.
Yeah, I didn't either. And that's part of the emotion of things, right? I mean, we talk about, from a self-defense standpoint, I like what Paul Howe says. He says, go about your work with a workmanlike attention to detail. In other words, no emotion. But it's hard to keep the emotion out when you're talking about a person losing their home or losing their retirement savings. It's tough to make unemotional decisions.
Hey, man. My family still talks about the time that my great-great-grandfather, George Washington Brown, co-signed a loan right before the Depression and lost everything. And they're still bitter and jaded about it. And that was in 1929,
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the factors that led to this mess, man. First, it was low interest rates and low lending standards. So we're going to say some broad brush things here, but I got some ways to help you think about these, because it's one thing to say predatory lending practices, but what the hell does that mean? So we're going to break down some of these terms, but these low interest rates and lax lending standards led to a housing price bubble where things just kept encouraging millions and millions to borrow beyond their means to buy homes that they couldn't afford, or maybe they bought second and third homes because they thought, I'll get in it quick and I'll sell it as the home prices rise.
Yep. I even know a couple of people who were buying condos in the Miami area when the building started construction. They would purchase 3 or 4 units, and before the building was over, they would almost double their money.
Wow.
They'd sell them before the units were even complete.
Jesus.
It's crazy.
Good on them, I guess. But
yeah,
a lot of people didn't get in and get out as clean as they wanted to.
Yep.
So the second causal factor was banks and subprime lenders kept up the pace by selling their mortgages on the secondary market in order to free up money to grant more mortgages. And that is one of the main things. And that's something that I'm going to use. We're going to dig into a little bit more, because just to say that, like, these banks and subprime lenders just kept dumping fuel on the fire and then getting the stuff off their books to sell it to Wall Street, and created a kind of a feedback loop, The third and final thing is that the financial firms that bought these mortgage-backed bundles took the mortgages that they bought from mom and pop banks in our hometowns across America. Wall Street bundled them up into these things called mortgage-backed securities, or CDOs, collateralized debt obligations. And then they resold them as mortgage-backed securities or mortgage bonds. And people bought them up by the thousands. But the problem was, when all these mortgages start defaulting, if you didn't get out, you were holding a lot of worthless pieces of paper.
Yep, absolutely. And to add on to that, the local banks, I closed on a house after all this happened. One thing I did was I after this was all over, I moved up in house. But I was asking the loan officer about it, and we'd become friendly, and she said, yeah, back during that time, the bank she had worked for then, each loan officer's job, so to speak, was to close 3 to 4 loans a day and collect those fees. And within a week, that mortgage was off. It was off the books. It was gone. So they really didn't care about the risk of it, because they weren't going to hold it but for 7 to 14 days.
That's exactly right. And so again, if you're watching this morning and you're thinking, should I share this or not? Please share it, because people need to understand what happened in order to prevent this kind of crap in the future. And my good friend Michael Gentili says liar loans. I had an experience of buying one of these out before the default. Yeah, this is true, man. And there's a couple other causal factors that I read about on another website, and I'm going to put links to all where you can find information about this. But really, I read and then reread Michael Lewis's amazing book, The Big Short. Please check that out, or if you're too bored to read the whole thing, just watch the movie. It's an amazing movie, and it goes in pretty good detail as to what really happened here. But one of the things that economists will say, well, it really didn't contribute to it, but I have to believe it had something to do with it. And that was the Community Reinvestment Act, which pushed banks to make investments in subprime areas. There was a lot of redlining in real estate back in the day. And so the Community Reinvestment Act was one of those things that was well-intentioned to get banks to lend in subprime areas. So when sifting through the debris, you know, the economists and think tanks say, well, it really didn't have much to do with it. But I have to believe it had something to do with starting the ball moving in that direction.
I couldn't agree more, Rich. I mean, there's, you know, it's a fine line to walk in a conversation. You know, a lot of that redlining was done based on broad brush stereotyping, socioeconomic typecasting, if you will. We don't want to lend in these neighborhoods because this is where people we don't want to lend money to live.
Yeah.
And that is wrong. But as is often the case with these things like the Community Reinvestment Act, they say, you can't do that. Well, then human nature gets involved, right?
Yeah.
And that's
it's the law of unintended consequences, right?
Absolutely. You know? Yeah.
So the second thing that I would say is a somewhat causal factor is Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Now, the key difference here, what you need to understand is where they source their loans from is really what makes the difference between whether it's Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. And Fannie Mae is the one that bought those mortgages from larger commercial banks, which has allowed those lenders to replenish their funds so that they could keep making these. So again, it was part of that feedback loop. And then the third and final thing that I would say is a sub cause of the causal factors was deregulating the financial system. Now, some people will say, you know, Rich, they're encumbered by laws. You know, we have to do this. But if you look at the Financial Services Modernization Act of 1999, it was one of those things that was lobbied heavily by the banks to say, look, take the shackles off of us. We promise we're only going to invest in low risk securities to protect our customers. You can trust us. But of course, then they started chasing the profitable derivative market, which we're going to talk more about, and they didn't keep the promise. And the final deregulation that was probably one of the causal factors was the Commodity Futures Modernization Act. That's a mouthful.
Yeah.
But again, it had more of the derivative. It exempted a lot of derivatives. So this whole shebang, now that we've talked about some of the causal factors, let's talk about how it all began. And it began with probably what were good intentions. If you look at, we come into the 2000s, the dot-com bubble had crashed. People that went out there and put a lot of money in every damn dot-com IPO they could find. And a lot of them were, you know, houses built on sand, and they crumbled and they lost a lot of money. Then we have the September 11th tax in 2001. The Federal Reserve lowered the federal funds rate from 6.5 in May of 2000 to 1% in June of 2003. Now, the aim, of course, was to boost the economy by making money more available to businesses and consumers at bargain rates. So that's what they're trying to do. The consequences of that, the good intention, was an upward spiral in home prices because borrowers took advantage, of course, like you said, human nature.
Right.
And now we move from 6.5 to 1%. I can get into that home. A matter of fact, honey, we can get a bigger home, right?
Yep. Because people don't buy the home price, Rich. They buy the payment.
That's right. Yeah.
We can afford a $1,500 payment. Well, the interest rates go down. Now $1,500 buys you more home. So,
that's exactly right.
You know, that's the bugaboo of it. You know, people don't fully understand the power of that sometimes, I think, you know, when you start looking at those sorts of things. So as rates go back up here eventually, whether the Fed does it like they just announced they're going to next year, or whether the bond market forces them to, that's what's going to drive house prices down.
Yeah. And so speaking of that, so you also have people, like you said, your friends that were buying condos in Miami when they lived in Cleveland, you know, and then 6 months later, before the thing's even finished, they're selling it for double what they had in it. So it's this lowering of the rate, which was well-intentioned, had some really disastrous consequences in the long term.
Yep.
The other thing that led to this, and this is where we're going to explain, this is where I want to spend a rather great deal of this morning, is that these local mom and pop banks that would normally, in years gone by, when our parents and grandparents took out a loan, they went and saw the bank manager or the loan officer at the bank that they'd been going to for years, and they took out a mortgage, and it stayed in your town.
Yep. But
what happened was, for a variety of reasons, these mom and pop banks in small towns across the country sold these mortgages off to Wall Street, where Wall Street repackaged them as mortgage bonds.
Mm-hmm.
And they did them in two different ways: mortgage-backed securities, or MBSs, or CDOs, collateralized debt obligations. And the difference is subtle, but very, very important. So this led to a secondary market for mom and pop banks to do some pretty shady stuff in order to keep feeding Wall Street and keep making a tidy profit.
Mm-hmm.
So let's dig into this a little bit. And like I said, I have, for those watching this morning, good morning. My jiu-jitsu coach, Cody Hudson, is on. Good morning, Cody. I'll see you tonight on the mat, sir. Michael Gentili says, yeah, it was our version of tulip speculation marketing. Yeah, just like they saw in the Netherlands.
Yep.
So let's look at this. I have a couple things here. So these are mortgages. Let's pretend.
Okay.
These are two mortgages taken out, and these are two mortgages taken out. Now, these two mortgages here, one is for Brown. Brown's bought a property on Mockingbird Lane. He's got a fixed rate. This is a prime client here, and he's a prime loan, and he's going to be sold off to a mortgage-backed security. Now, of course, Brown is a small business owner, retired Marine. He's got a great FICO score. He's a smart dude, or so we think. Here's
I'm sorry. Was that expression out loud? Sorry.
Yeah. Sometimes I can't stop myself. This one is Will Wood. Here's another Mensa candidate. And Will is bought himself and his wife and family a home on Grove Lane. He got himself a fixed rate. This is a prime mortgage right here. We're going to put this in a mortgage-backed security. Look at that. He's a commercial airline pilot, sexiest man alive in 2004. Got a FICO score of 800. These are good. But Wall Street wants these. So we sell these off to Wall Street. They go off our books. Wall Street takes lots of other AAA rated guys like me and Will Wood and many of you watching this morning, and they sell them off as a mortgage-backed security. And the rating agencies say, yeah, you can buy whatever they call this mortgage-backed security. They're going to give it a sexy name and sell it off to people. Not a problem. But then remember, the rates start coming down, and there's folks living in apartments that said, honey, maybe now we can afford that house.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe now's our chance. You finally got the job.
Don't want to miss out, right?
Don't want to miss out. You finally got that job at the hospital.
And there's a term you'll hear thrown around here right now, Rich. FOMO. You familiar with FOMO? FOMO. Fear of missing out.
Oh.
We're seeing a lot of that right now in the stock market, crypto, real estate. Human nature is going to do what human nature is going to do.
Yeah, we were talking about that, I think, off camera recently, about how, like in Weimar, Germany, the guy gets on the elevator, and the elevator operator is making pennies a day, giving stock tips to people. So that's when you knew you got a problem.
Yep.
So then you got then the fear of missing out that Will just talked about leads to these right here. What are these mortgages? Here's a Mr. Jones. He just bought a house on Cardinal. He got an adjustable rate mortgage. He's a subprime loan. Okay. He's a contractor with a FICO score of 610. We want to definitely get that off our books. Here's another mortgage I'm holding here for Mr. Smith on Main Street. He's an adjustable rate mortgage. He's got no job, no income. So he's got a ninja loan or a liar's loan, like Mr. Gentili said, a FICO score of 530. My God. So what happens is the Wall Street does buy these subprime loans. But then they try to package them with maybe a couple of good ones and try to sell it. And people look at the actual fine print. They dig into the spreadsheet and see a lot of these Joneses and Smiths with subprime adjustable rate mortgage. They're like, no, I'm not taking that. I'm not buying that bond. So do you think that the Wall Street banks, they just warehouse that on the books because they can't sell it?
No.
No. We don't do that. You know what we do? We can't make it a mortgage-backed security. Nobody wants it. But I bet you if I turn it into a collateralized debt obligation. It's a CDO. It's not a MBS. It's not a mortgage-backed security.
Totally different.
Totally different product, man.
Yeah.
And here's the deal. If you were just looking at these one or two, you'd say, I'm not taking this bet. This is a loser's bet. This guy got a job. The other guy's he's got a seasonal job as a contractor, but he's got a FICO of 610, adjustable rate mortgage. This guy's going to default. But when you take thousands of these crappy subprime loans and you package them into a collateralized debt obligation, remember, it still has to go over to Standard & Poor's or some other rating agency for a bond rating before it's sold. But the horrors of the rating agency have that fear of missing out. They don't want their clients on Wall Street to go to another rating agency. So they'll slap this with a 92 or 93% triple rating, even though it's filled with junk.
Yep. And you mentioned it, but I really want to expand on it a little bit. The rating agencies played a huge part in this. If they would have done their due diligence, they wouldn't have given these things AAA or even AA ratings. It would have been B's, C's, somewhere in there, and it wouldn't have. This wouldn't have happened. But they were scared of missing out on. They had FOMO of missing out on other work for these same investment banks for doing IPOs. The stock market was hot. They didn't want to get locked out of these things, and even went down to your local appraiser. You know, I had an appraiser ask me once, well, so what do you want it to come in at? I'm like, well, that's not how it's supposed to. You look at comparables. Yeah, of course I gave him a number, but you know, it's not how it's supposed to work. And thankfully that part has been changed now. The bank no longer gets to pick the appraiser. It's picked random. The appraiser is picked randomly from a pool. Whereas before they could say, no, we want Jim over there to be an appraiser on this deal because they knew Jim would play ball. So, you know, so thankfully that part of it has changed.
Yeah. I'll play squash with Jim. I know what he's going to do. So the problem with the people like the Will Wood and Rich Brown, they're going to buy a home, maybe a lake house, and they're done, right? They're not using this necessarily as an investment vehicle. They got great FICO scores. They got great jobs. They're stable, but there's a limited pool of these stable ones. Guess what? It's an unlimited pool, basically, of subprimes. Because I can, if we're really doing these liar's loans, there was loans given out, and I know that you're familiar with this, Will, where they use their dog's name to fill out the loan application.
Oh yeah, and there was even reports that they just wanted a name, not even a driver's license number, no social security number, nothing. Just write the loan because the bank's gonna be rid of it in a week or two anyway. What do we care?
Yeah, there's no moral hazard on making a bad loan if you're just going to repackage it and sell it off by Monday morning.
Right.
You know, I originate a mortgage on Friday, hand the client the keys, we sign the stuff with the title, and on Monday afternoon, it's sold off.
Yep.
So this leads to, you know, an upward spiral in home prices, as we mentioned before. It creates this giant secondary market for having these guys to go out, I'm going to call it predatory lending. They're going to go at these because here's the deal. People with these rock bottom FICO scores that can't keep a job, more often than not, I hate to say this, these people probably have an IQ of less than 100. Let's just call it what it is. And I say that because you have to remember something. If the 100 on the IQ scale is the mean, then that means 50% of Americans have an IQ less than 100. Do you think that they can understand what an adjustable rate mortgage is? Because back then they didn't have to really dig in to explain to their client what that is.
Exactly. And the person originating the loan, even if they're good people, even if they're well-intentioned, you know, we all get caught in these feedback loops. Rich, you and I sit down and have dinner with somebody who's not a gun person, not a self-defense person. It's real easy to talk over their head real fast. And what are they going to do? They don't want to feel stupid. They sit there and go, yeah, okay. Right. So if it's explained to the borrower, did they really understand? I mean, was there a quiz at the end? Of course.
Exactly.
Not, right.
No.
It's just, do you understand? If you understand all this, sign here and you'll get your house. They understand if I sign right here, I get the house.
And as I mentioned at the beginning, you know, Will, my mother lost it. And I remember when she lost her house, I was kind of shocked. I'm like, oh, this is a nice house, Mom. And I'm thinking, I know you work at a jewelry store and I kind of got a good idea what you make, and you make a little bit of commission and you're a pretty good salesman, but I felt like she was in over her head.
Mhm.
And then finally, the next thing you know, when I find out she's filing for bankruptcy, I'm like, what happened? She's like, well, the payments just kept going up and going up. I'm like, they kept going up.
Mhm.
You didn't get an adjustable rate. Well, yeah, because that's what they said. I would have it for years and would never really see that. And I'm like, oh my
Mhm.
God, why would you do that?
Well, and that goes back to, like we were talking about before we started the show, Rich. It goes back to our education system.
Yeah.
You know, um, why isn't this taught in high school? Why isn't there a budgeting class? Here's how a mortgage works. Here's how, debt works. I mean, I know you mentioned you talk to your kids. I'm teaching it to my kids. Debt is a tool. I'm not one of those guys that says debt is always evil.
Yeah.
But debt is a tool and it can make you a slave.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
that's not taught in our schools anymore. And it wasn't taught even, I mean, I graduated high school in 86. It wasn't taught then either. I
No,
learned at the school of hard knocks, just like most of us did.
I know. And I don't know why they don't, take some of that algebra and make it into let's do calculations for you, or let's run a business for you. Like my friend Michael Gentili's on, he's a Lean Six Sigma black belt trainer, I believe. And, when I went through the Lean Six Sigma training to I think I got my green belt, it was amazing, Will, because you got to run a small business and do the calculations and use those analytics to make your little widget company that you're playing with more effective and efficient.
Yeah.
And like, why can't we do this in high school? I don't get it.
I don't either. And like a lot of things, you get some of your best advice when you're a kid and you don't even really realize it until years and years later on. And when I was growing up, grade school, junior high, had a neighbor. He was a bricklayer, owned a masonry company. And we were talking about something one time and he said, "Will, my calculator has never lied to me." And I didn't really realize what that meant until about 10 or 12 years later when I was trying to dig myself out of debt in my early to mid 20s because I had a credit card. So I went out and bought everything, right?
Yep.
And I thought about what old Mr. Work said. And I was like, I get it now. And if that had been really explained to me in high school, I might not have ever dug that hole. Or
Yeah,
maybe
that's
I wouldn't have
exactly
dug it
right.
as deep. And so I put it back to the education system on a lot of this, Rich.
No, I do too. But again, what is our education system designed to do? And I would make a argument that it's designed to create, socialized, well-adjusted Americans more so than making us being able to compete in a global economy.
Absolutely.
But here's the secondary thing was the SEC relaxed net capital requirements for 5 investment banks, and they were Goldman Sachs, Merrill Lynch, Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns, and Morgan Stanley. And what relaxing the net capital requirements did was a lot of these banks went to 30 or 40 times what they initially should have been doing. So it created another problem.
Yeah. Let's think about that for a second, though, Rich. Let's just take the low end of that number, 30 times leverage. So let's see if my public school math will keep up with me here. So if you went out and bought $100,000 house, they could leverage that up to 3 million. Did I do that math right?
I think so.
I'm pretty sure that doesn't work in the real world.
Yeah. But here's the problem, man. Okay, all this gets started because the interest rates come down to 1%, but eventually the interest rates are going to start rising again. And the Fed started raising the rates in June of 2004. And 2 years later, the federal funds rate had reached 5.25%. So it's creeping back up. They lowered it to get the economy going. The economy's going along really well. So they start raising it back up to 5.25, where it stayed until August of 2007. And then I think it was in, 2004, home ownership peaked at 69.2%, which is amazing.
And
And
I remember them touting how great that was.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it is great if everybody's doing it right, right? But it wasn't.
No, and that's the problem. I remember hearing that as well, like you did. Oh my God, this is the greatest thing in the world. More Americans are owning homes than ever before. This can't be a bad thing. Well, let's just face it. Not every little Timmy gets to grow up and be an astronaut. Not everybody gets to realize home ownership, and that's unfortunate. But a lot of people make bad decisions, and that affects their life outcomes, or sometimes circumstances throws them a bad hand. But for those people, they may not ever be able to afford a home. And we have to realize that in a capitalist society, that's kind of okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's the way it is. I mean, in that documentary, Caddyshack, Judge Smales taught us that the world needs ditch diggers too.
Yes, it is. That's
Yeah.
right. That documentary. See, Jeremiah is on, says morning all coin number 2019. If you want to find out what a coin number is, check out the link in today's show. You can get your coin today. Mark Few is on. Good morning. Mark says, good morning, Rich. Good morning, Will. Merry Christmas to all. Merry Christmas to you guys. Let's see. Alan Kelly says, I was fortunate that my math teachers in high school would devote some time on personal banking and budgeting circa late 60s, early 70s. Yeah, you were very fortunate. That did not happen with me.
Me either.
So when the Fed starts raising the rate to 5.25, that creates a huge problem because now the homes were worth less than what they paid them because people start jumping out. They couldn't sell their house without owing the money to the lenders. Yep. And if they had adjustable rate mortgages, which remember our subprime guys did, they got these ARM loans in the first few years. They were living like rock stars, right?
Yep, sure were.
And now they're upside down. You know, the home is worth less, and as the home goes down, their ARM rate is just skyrocketing. So most people, well, not most people, but a lot of people just walked away from the house.
Yeah. I know some people who did. In fact, did you know the bankers had a term for it when people did that? They had they called it jingle mail. People would mail the keys in. They could shake the envelopes and the keys would jingle. They called it jingle mail.
I've never heard that.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yep.
So by 2007, 25 subprime lenders went under just in that year alone. Actually, let me back up with that. In 2007, between February and March, 25 subprime lenders went under. And if that tells you anything. And again, you could say, okay, well, screw them. They knew better. They took a gamble and they lost. But in August of 2007, the dominoes really start to fall. The financial institutions, as well as the government, is having really a lot of trouble assessing the value of trillions of dollars worth of what's now toxic mortgage-backed securities. Because remember, these mortgages, now these are just a representative of visual representation of four little mortgages, but this is reminiscent of millions and millions of these that have been bundled and sold off. And inside of them, there are good mortgages and there are terrible, terrible, toxic, subprime, adjustable rate mortgages, people with FICO scores, rock bottom, no job, no income, and sent their keys back to the bank and said, sorry.
Yep.
So it's to disentangle this now, to make it even worse. So remember, I said a mortgage-backed security was normally a decent product. But the products that could not be sold because they were such trash were called collateralized debt obligations. Now, these CDOs, because the banks knew they were risky to begin with, they started taking bets on which of these CDOs would or would not default. And then they created something called a synthetic CDO. And that was basically like a shadow version of CDO. There's really no product there. It's a side bet the banks were making with each other on whether that CDO would default or not. So it really became a casino, man. And then you had CDO squared, which was where you take all these side bets, not actual products, but these side bet products on whether this other guy's bet would succeed or fail. And then you would bundle them up and CDO square these things. I blame a lot of this. Go ahead.
So there was a bet on a bet on a bet.
Bingo.
Okay.
And it just kept going and going and going.
Yeah.
And again, if you want to try to wrap your head around this, please read Michael Lewis's excellent book, The Big Short, or at least watch the movie, and I think you'll get a good sense of what's going on. So March 2008 comes along, and Bear Stearns is going under. England has to nationalize Northern Rock. You've got Bear Stearns, pillar of Wall Street since 1923, collapses and is acquired by J.P. Morgan Chase for pennies on the dollar. But J.P. Morgan Chase wouldn't take it unless the government guaranteed that they wouldn't get screwed on the deal. And I remember that.
I wish I could get a piece of one of those government guaranteed deals.
I would love to get a piece of one of those deals.
Yeah.
September 2008 rolls around and Lehman Brothers goes under. Now, Lehman Brothers, of course, prior to Lehman Brothers going under, Indy Mac went under. And at the time of prior to Lehman Brothers going under, it was the largest bank ever to fail in the United States. And then you've got Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac that has to be seized by the U.S. government. Lehman Brothers goes under in September, and this marked, I believe, until today, it's still the largest bankruptcy in U.S. history.
I believe it is.
Yeah. So the aftermath, a lot of people would say, okay, well, Congress and everybody steps in, they create TARP, the Troubled Asset Relief Program, which cost American taxpayers $439.6 billion. Billion with a B. I mean, eventually we're talking about real money here, but back then.
Eventually. We're not yet.
Not yet,
but eventually.
Now they'll be quick to tell you, yeah, Rich, I know TARP costs $439.6 billion. But you know what, man? We got back $442.6 billion after we sold all those stocks at a profit.
So let's think about that for a second. I mean, that I'm going to do some rounding here, that $2.5 billion in profit, that isn't pocket change. But you're talking about 0.5% return on investment.
Yeah.
I don't like deals like that. That's pretty skinny.
I don't either. And again, the stuff I was reading last night, it said the public indignation was, of course, widespread. It looks like the bankers they made these reckless decisions, synthetic CDOs, and then the rating agencies and this idea of too big to fail come out. And I hate the fact that I only had this realization last night after reading the book twice, watching the movie a number of times, reading some other articles in The Economist and other places, and then preparing for hours yesterday for this show today. It finally dawned on me, Will, it wasn't that they were too big to fail. It's that you got too many people to arrest.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, think about it.
And too many people to arrest who know too much.
Oh, my God. I mean, who the hell are we going to put in jail? Only one man went to jail out of the entire financial crisis. One guy. And we'll talk about him in just a moment.
Okay.
But you're going to put everybody at the rating agency that took all those subprime mortgages with the terrible FICO scores, let the banks put them into collateralized debt obligations, and then give them a 92, 93% AAA rating? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And I was reading Standard & Poor's website and Moody's last night, and they will say that, well, we've got this proprietary way that we analyze these very difficult to understand products. Rich, pat you on the head, pal. Go away. You don't understand it. We got this. Well, how did you do that? Or did you do it because you had this fear of missing out? The Wall Street banks were just going to take the business down the road to Moody's or somebody else. So you didn't want to miss out. It's a private company. They have to make money. I get it. But you're going to put every one of those people in jail that misled the investors?
It's not going to happen.
Not going to happen. So it wasn't so much it's too big to fail of it. You're going to have millions of people that have to get carted off in handcuffs because even if they weren't outright violating the letter of the law, these were ethical and moral bad decisions.
Absolutely.
So everything I read seemed to indicate too on this TARP, hey, look, yeah, the banks got bailed out, but you got to understand something. This was what was best for the economy, Rich. It kept the economy moving. We didn't have to go into a depression. And oh, by the way, look, man, we actually made money. See?
Yeah. Well, and I remember, and I believe it was a senator. I'll look it up and throw it up in the coined members area. But it was an interview, and it was during the debate on TARP. Hank Paulson, who was the Secretary of the Treasury at the time, I believe was behind closed doors, and the senator talked about it afterwards, told him, if you don't approve TARP, we will end up in martial law.
Yeah.
Now, first off, how does Hank Paulson, who's been a banker his entire life, is now the Secretary of the Treasury, how does he know that? Is he fear-mongering? That's my guess. Is he bailing out his friends, his buddies, his own stock portfolio? Call me cynical, but I'm saying probably, yeah.
Yeah, he just come from Goldman Sachs, right?
Yeah, I believe it was Goldman.
Hank Paulson, yeah.
Yeah, martial law over. I mean, anything's possible, right? But to say that's what's going to happen and then have senators act on that, hey, let's time out here. Let's think this through a little bit.
Yeah, Dan brings up a great point here. Dan says,
Okay.
I worked in the mortgage industry for over 20 years ago. I've seen firsthand the desperation to get out of debt by consolidating loans, as well as the predatory nature of people in the business. You have to get people to hate money to fix it.
Yeah.
Yeah, either hate money or, like you said, it's just be dispassionate about it. Look at it as binary, or it's a tool.
Yep. That's all it is. Just like we've been talking about from the beginning. All money does is purchase things we need to live and support our families.
That's right. So although the banks did get bailed out, you could say that the TARP did its job. Everybody pats herself on the back. We made a little bit of money, but the individual people were really affected. Unemployment goes over 10%. 3.8 million Americans lost their homes to foreclosure. Like I said, my mother was one of those people that ended up in an apartment until I could put her into a house that I owned and get her out of there. So it was a global event. It wasn't just restricted to the United States. We saw Greece default on its debts. Ireland's economy fell. Portugal and Spain suffered extreme levels of unemployment. There was very few nations in the world that weren't affected by this. So let's take a look at why all this happened as we just kind of recap. The predatory lenders who marketed home ownership to people that could not possibly make an ARM loan. I mean, all you have to do is look down the road into the future. This is what they make now. This is what they've always made. Are they going to be able to make this adjustable rate mortgage loan in 3, 4, 5 years when it starts to go up? No. Okay, then what the hell are we doing?
Yep. Well, and that's where if the bankers would have had to hold these loans locally, and they would have lost their houses if they made bad bets on people, gave out bad loans, would have been a whole different game. And really, the people who thought they were winning when they got these adjustable rate mortgages, they weren't. They wound up some of the biggest losers. And so the system didn't do them any favors.
No, it didn't. And, again, so we got predatory lenders. We've got number 2, the investment gurus who bought up all these mortgages, bundled off into mortgage-backed securities, repackaged and sold them to people, got them rated. When they know damn well when that rating come back from Moody's and they look at it and go, they gave this damn CDO a 93.5% AAA rating. I put the CDO together. I built the damn spreadsheet. I know it's crap. All right, we'll sell it off anyway.
Yep.
The agencies that gave those mortgage bundles, obviously the top ratings, we talked about that. And the fourth and final thing with the investors who failed to check the ratings or simply took, they started unloading all this stuff.
Yeah.
We could talk about which banks that failed. I'm really not interested in having that conversation because I really don't care, I guess I should say.
Well, it's not, I mean, I don't think it's really going to add anything to our conversation this morning, how people can use this bit of history to help prepare ourselves for the near-term future here.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that would be probably the most interesting is you had 500 banks fail from between 2008 and 2015. And if you compare that to the preceding 7 years, you had 25.
Yep. One thing I'll throw in there is you had a note in there about the FDIC and no individual depository lost money.
Yeah.
A couple things on that. The FDIC actually came very close to being insolvent during that period of time. And they're not in the FDIC is not in great shape now. And the, it escaped me. Sorry.
Okay. I have senior moments all the time.
They're coming more and more often too.
Yeah. One thing I will say is, if you look back, like, what did we do? Where did TARP get all this money? Will, I mean, where did they get the almost $450 billion exactly? Money printer go burr.
Exactly. Crank it up, baby.
Crank it up. So here we have and this is the scary part because it goes back to what you and I have talked about for the past several shows on when we talk about economic concerns, the lack of moral hazard. They money print their way out of the problem. We don't go into a depression.
Right.
That sets a dangerous precedent.
And it
And
happens
so,
again and again. And that new money, what's the one thing money always seeks, Rich? It always seeks a return. It always seeks a yield.
that's
So
right.
one bubble pops, the next bubble goes. .com bubble pops, move it into real estate. And I
Yeah.
remember the term wealth effect after 0809? That
No,
was when
unpack that.
Bernanke who was printing money off, and he said we need the stock market to go up so that people feel wealthy, so they will feel confident to go out and spend. Yeah. So it's that whole psychological part of this that it's a tough one. You know, calculator will never lie to you, but psychology will run the calculator.
Yeah. I remember when the first stimulus checks got printed, and that word really didn't exist in our lexicon prior to the first round of payments got sent out. And I'm going to say it was probably in 2000. I guess it would have been 2008. Yeah. So I look at this money and I go, to me, it was insulting because I'm like, you think this $1,800, because I think it was, you got paid per kid or something like that, $600 per kid at the time I had 3 children.
Yep.
I remember looking at that going, you think I'm so stupid I'm going to take this and run out and buy a damn plasma television or whatever was the cool gadget in 2008. And I'm going to pump this money back in the American economy. And out of spite, because that's how I operate.
That's why we like you, Rich.
I know. I took that damn money. You know what I did? Me and my wife went on a vacation to Canada. I'm like, we're not leaving until we spent every damn bit of this money. I'm going to put it in the Canadian economy. You're not going to make me do something I don't want to do.
Well, and that's where those stimulus checks, remember after 9/11 when Bush said, if you want to be patriotic, go to the mall. Remember
I know,
that?
right?
And he was lambasted for that. And I lambasted him for that. I was like, this is stupid. But he was right. Because if you want to keep the economy going, you got to keep the consumer going.
I remember being pissed off about that too, for a variety of reasons. One of the things that I did not like about it was, here we were, the military, I was on recruiting at the time, right? And we've got this war on terror, and we're trying to feed the recruiting machine, and nobody's wanting to enlist. And I'm thinking, I wish some speechwriter would say, go see your local recruiter. Instead, he's telling them to go to the mall and spend money. And I'm like, man, we are struggling out here to put bodies in uniform so that they can go out and fight our nation's enemies. We're killing ourselves out here. And the president's telling people to go spend money at the mall and not saying go see a local recruiter. So that rubbed me the wrong way. And then the other thing I would say that rubs me the wrong way about that sentiment is they're not buying American products at the mall, man. They're buying Chinese crap at the mall.
Yep.
And I've never seen this before. I told my son the other day when we were talking about it, when I was growing up, there wasn't Chinese product. We were buying Japanese, Hong Kong, Taiwanese products. And then it slowly, as our relationship with China has built up over the past 50 years, now go into Walmart, pick up anything you want on the shelf. It ain't going to be made in America.
Yep.
It's going to be made in somewhere outside of our borders. And like I told my son, during the Cold War, it was as if during the Cold War, Will, you would go in with Soviet missiles pointed at us, and you go into the Walmart and pick up something off the shelf, and it's made in Russia. That did not happen. There was no Russian products anywhere. But we're in a Cold War with China.
Yes, we are.
And see what you're buying.
Boy, there's a show in that one, brother. You look at everything we've got going on with China right now. We keep sending them money. When we get done, I got a little thing I read this morning about about Evergrande and the shipping stuff. Going back to those shows, just a real quick update on those two things. But yeah, we're in a Cold War with China. But if you look at cyber and intellectual property, boy, it's pretty hot.
Yeah, it is. And of course, that's what my son is doing. And you can guess who the adversary that they're watching is.
Yep, sure.
So do you want to give us the update, Will?
Sure. Evergrande defaulted, completely defaulted, even on their Chinese denominated bonds. They defaulted there. And that's one thing, in the financial world that I'm following, the Chinese are showing the cojones to just say, hey, go bankrupt.
Yeah.
The Chinese government. Unfortunately, now reports are up to another 20 developers are either bankrupt or on the verge of bankruptcy over there. In the same way our housing crisis affected the whole world the way you outlined, I don't think it'll affect the whole world in the same way, but there will be some ripple effects here.
Yeah.
The other one is with the shipping crisis, backlog, supply chain, however you want to term that. I was just on the West Coast here recently. I counted 38 ships off the coast that I could see, which is down a lot until you factor in two things. First, if you go look at any of the websites, the ship tracking websites, they used to show ships all across the oceans, across every ocean. You can see them in transit. Won't see them there anymore. They have the equivalent, and an aircraft is called a transponder. It's what tags the aircraft's information to the air traffic controller on the radar. They have told the ships to shut those transponders off en route.
Wow.
So those websites can no longer track them through that information. Those transponders are also shut off when those ships are in Chinese waters, including at the port, so nobody can see the backlogs over there. They're also parking the excess ships on the west coast of the United States, more than 150 miles offshore right now, so they cannot be seen.
God.
Yeah, so it's smoke and mirrors. They'll go,
oh
yeah, there's only 30 ships out there. Now there was 75 a few months ago. See, we're doing better. No, not so much. Yeah. The other one I'm going to throw out there for you, Rich, because you had a thing here in your notes about Dodd-Frank.
Yes.
Did you want to hit that real quick?
Yeah, we can. I mean, it's one of the only pieces of legislation to come out after the housing collapse. And the Dodd-Frank is the Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act of 2010. And it's designed to shut down some of these predatory lending things. But I don't know. We'll see if it has any effect in the years to come.
Mm-hmm. A couple things on that that I found, Rich, as I was kind of digging back through the old brain cells and the internet last night on this.
Mm-hmm.
Bank bail-ins. Have you heard of those?
No. What's that?
We know what bank bailout is. You just spent some time talking about that. A bank bail-in comes from Dodd-Frank. It is okayed under that legislation that is now law, and that is that your deposits, Rich, and mine too, are now actually legally considered a loan to the bank.
Really?
An unsecured loan to the bank. So if the bank goes under, that was an unsecured loan that you gave them when your paycheck went in there.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So, and that has, and this is one of those ones when I first heard about this next part, I was like, yeah, but that's over there. Okay. In Cyprus, a few years back, they did a bank bail-in. The currency was failing, and they switched to the euro, and every depositor with more than $100,000 in euros deposited in the bank took a haircut on everything over $100,000.
Oh man.
Yeah. So that's okay under the legislation. And boy, in today's world of us versus them, elites versus whoever, you can see that. Well, that guy's got, $200,000 in the bank. What's he need all that for? You can see him playing the game, right, wrong, or indifferent.
Yeah.
So, Alan Kelly says, so no FDIC. No, Alan, the FDIC still exists. It's still there. It is grossly underfunded, however, to my understanding. The bail-ins would be as I understand them, a last resort.
Jesse,
I don't claim to be an expert on that.
No, and I'm going to read about it because I'd never heard that term, so I definitely need to get educated on it. Doug says, have you ever seen the Zeitgeist movie? I have not.
I'm not familiar with that.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
Jesse says, Rich, Will, what are your thoughts on the trucker protest in Colorado? What do you think, Will?
I'm not familiar with it. What's going on?
I'm not either. Jesse, if you can help us out there, send us a link. Yeah. We'll definitely get educated on that. Yeah. Will says they lie again and again and again. Yes, they do.
It's almost like there's a pattern.
Yeah. Doug says,
go ahead.
Catch that?
Go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, if you need to catch that, go ahead.
Nope. That's just I've got my dogs trained to ring a doorbell when they need to go in or out.
Oh, nice. Look at that.
Yeah.
Mine has a little bell they ring. Doug says we refinanced about that time. The mortgage event was shocked The mortgage agent was shocked we didn't go for an interest-only adjustable rate loan. Shocked. I
Yeah.
bet they had a financial incentive in you taking that product.
Yep.
He then
And-
goes on to say she
Yep.
actually set up our loan with a balloon. Luckily, I had a financial calculator and asked her why the payment was lower than I had expected.
Yep. And hey, there's a great example of you walk in expecting one thing, boy, have that spidey sense up and running. You know, at the end of the day, all the judge is going to ask is, Mr. Brown, did you sign this?
Exactly.
That's it. Hey, going back to your let me see here. Jesse said there's photos of truckers on the side of the road in protest of the sentencing of the deadly accident. Yeah, I saw some a trucker caused an accident. I'm not familiar with it, but it sends to 110 years, if I
Yes.
recall correctly.
Yeah, and that's a crazy one, man. I did remember reading about that. And the trucker is coming down the hill. He pushes the brakes go out. For whatever reason, I don't know why, he doesn't take the off ramp. You know, there's a runaway truck ramp.
Yep.
And for whatever reason, God knows, he doesn't take it. Instead, he plows ahead, and traffic gets congested, and of course his brakes don't work, and he kills four people and injures God knows how many. So there's this massive wreck. This is a guy, no criminal record. He's a trucker, just like millions of other Americans out there doing his thing. He made a bad decision to not take the runaway ramp, and for that he got 100 years in prison. And even the judge, when he gave him the sentence, I do remember reading about this, just being shocked about it. The judge says, I don't want to do this. I don't think that if I was going to sentence you, this would not be what the sentence I would give you. But the mandatory minimum for what the crime is, I have to give you 100 years. And the guy's like 20 something years old. It's just there's a guy right now walking the street, breathing the same air with you and me, who killed 10 people in New York City back in the 70s. He shot 7 children and 3 women over some drug deal gone bad. He was looking for the drug dealers in some New York hellhole. Walks in, they're not there, but their families are. So he wipes out 3 women and their 7 children.
Oh my goodness.
He gets a death penalty. Some governor in New York commutes all those sentences to life, and then life gets recalculated to just mean 20 something years. He's done more than 20. Have a nice day. You're back on the street. And he is out there today doing his thing. And this trucker is going to die in prison someday. So we live in a weird world.
This is me shutting up. So if the worst case scenario happens to me, Andrew Bronca doesn't have to explain that for me in court.
Yeah.
Hey, going back to your CDOs you were talking about, Rich, I will link an article from the Atlantic. The title of the article is "The Looming Bank Collapse." It's their July-August issue of 2020. They now, at that time, instead of CDOs, is now CLOs, collateralized loan obligations. So
But it's the same crap, isn't it?
The wheels turning right back around. You know, and as they print more and more of this money, it's just going to seek more. I mean, money seeks yield, money seeks return. I mean, I do as an investor, you do it. Everybody who's got a 401k does it.
And see that I'm glad you said 401k, because I was thinking about it a minute ago. If you want to get pissed off, you should be, because when the UAW's pension fund is trying to find somewhere to place that money where they can make a return to keep feeding money to these pensioners that are no longer working on the automotive line, they go out and buy this crap. And there's some a-hole that's standing there smiling, going, yeah, I'll let you in on this CDO. This is a CDO squared. And the guy's like, CDO squared, what's that mean? Well, it's a complicated instrument. It's filled with these tranches. And it's really complicated, but it's got a 93% AAA rating.
And it pays 6% yield.
Pays 6% yield. And the poor guy that's responsible for the UAW pension fund or whatever pension fund goes, okay, well, damn, I'll trust you. I'm going to trust you, your bank. I'm going to trust the ratings agency, and I'm going to trust every American that has a tranche inside this thing with their mortgage, that it's going to be a good investment for me and my pensioners. And they got screwed.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I just saw an article, CalPERS, which is the California Pension Fund. They just got okayed to take riskier investment opportunities because, yet again, they're falling behind. with what inflation's doing, with the limits on what they can invest in, they can't get enough yield to keep up with the cost of living adjustments that are currently happening and that they expect. So they're gonna run riskier and riskier investments. It just happens over and over again in history, Rich. I mean,
I know. And
we
again,
don't learn.
we don't learn. And again, I'm troubled by the fact that we printed our way out of this problem. And now we're trying to print our way out of it again.
Yep.
And where we printed our way out of the greatest financial collapse in 80 years, which it was, the housing crisis, we printed our way out of it with only $36 billion. That's what it took. Yeah. Now we're talking trillions and trillions. And now the next time we have a thing and we try to print our way out of it, what is it going to be? Quadrillions? At what point is the money going to become worthless?
Well, and that goes back to the discussion last week. And I think I kind of surprised you with my opinion on that when I said, I don't think this is the big one for inflation. I don't. Yeah. I think we're going to see one more big downturn, and then they're going to print like crazy to get out of that one because it keeps working. So keep doing it, right? And I think that's when we're going to see something like, if not actual hyperinflation, but it's, from the politician standpoint, it keeps working. So just keep doing it.
I know.
It's like I tell people I know, I do certain things financially, budgeting. And when I find something that works, I do it with monotonous regularity. Mm-hmm. Why? I mean, it's not that I won't change, but if that's working, why the heck would I change?
I know.
So, and from their standpoint, it works.
It is, but it's Russian roulette. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And
eventually it is. Yep.
Eventually you're not going to have an empty chamber in that gun.
Yeah. I watched Deer Hunter. I know how that turns out.
That's a great movie, man.
Yeah, it is. That's an awesome movie.
Yeah. People need to go back and watch that. If you haven't seen the 70s classic Deer Hunter, man, do yourself a favor.
Hey, I see Will Parker threw one up here and said, with so many liars and thieves in public office is the reason his bride won't support him running for state assembly. All it takes for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. And he is right about that. Now, right. I did watch Yellowstone, and Will Parker could join John Dutton up there,
for governor.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'd vote for him. Either one of them, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. Alan Kelly's, let's see, Jeremiah says, I hate to say it, but there's no closing that box now. No, there's not. Because they keep going to that well and thinking there's going to be a genie every single time to bail you out. Yep. Alan says, that's why I said it earlier. The reality market is going bonkers. The realty market, I'm sorry, going bonkers. Sell high, low investment, inflation, kind of low interest rates, et cetera.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And now there's a lot of FOMO because now the Fed has announced 3 interest rate hikes next year. So now hurry up and do it now. Hurry up and do it now.
Well, you and I talked about this. Because I was thinking the same thing, that we love to go to this place on the coast. I'm like, maybe we buy a little condo that we can vacation in and Airbnb it when we're not there. But the prices have gone up to the point where, if I would have done this 5 years ago, it would have been good. But now the prices are through the roof, and it's just it's made out of unobtainium at this point because everybody's doing the same damn thing.
And I've been looking at a spot in Florida for years and years, and I should have pulled the trigger way back when. But now you and I have both moved into FUD, which is the other side of FOMO. Do you know what that is?
No, what is that?
FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And I'm there.
I'm there, man.
I'm holding a lot of cash in my accounts right now because this market, I'm not digging it. No. I don't know what's going to happen. Now, here, can I throw one thing out there for you? Because we're going to talk about derivatives, and this is something that, I was ranting one time on Facebook or with friends or whatever about the CDOs and stuff. And a friend of mine who's a real true financial guy said, well, you have derivatives. You're in derivative contracts, Will, you know that? And I went, what are you talking about? And he said, you got an insurance policy? I said, well, yeah, I've got car insurance, home insurance, an umbrella insurance policy, and all that. He goes, those are derivative contracts. A derivative contract from the banker standpoint is if the Rich Brown bank fails and Will has invested money in that bank, then Will will get paid. And so I would buy that derivative contract. He said, so what it is you're buying a contract that if an unlikely event occurs, you get paid. Well, isn't that homeowner's insurance if your house burns down?
Yeah.
So
It is. And
but the problem there is the big difference there, of course, is the actuaries and the insurance companies can tell you the chances of your house burning down to within, a millionth of a percent. These other derivatives that you were referring to are a whole different animal as far as knowing the risks involved.
yeah,
And that, of course, is the huge difference. But in strict textbook terms, they're both derivative contracts.
that's wow. I never thought of it that way. Which leads into something we didn't talk about, and I really don't want to get into it because we're over an hour and 10 minutes, but the credit default swaps, which ultimately brought down AIG, because you started mentioning insurance, and it reminded me that there was this whole credit default swap scheme going in the background, trading off debt obligation and writing insurance products to cover if the CDOs went down. That was another big thing that hurt during the housing crisis, but that could be a show in and of itself.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we got a few show ideas out of this one.
Yeah. All right. Well, anything else to cover this morning?
No, sir. That's all I have.
All right, folks. Well, you want to lead us? You want to take us out, Will?
The fight's coming, folks, and it might be self-defense. It might be financial. Be ready.